Hello and welcome to the Quest for Facts podcast. I welcome my guest today, Agent Burt. Burt hails from Colorado and is an avid researcher in topics such as U.S. history, the Constitution, and law, among many others. Burt is the author of multiple books, including Arms, Not Firearms, where he makes a distinction between what arms are and the fictitious firearms term and how it was created. Additionally, he has authored a book titled Cannabis Sativa is Not Illegal, where he goes into the particulars of that subject. Burt has been interviewed by many notable people online, such as Clint Richardson, Jan Irvin of the former Gnostic Media, Deanna Spangola, among others. I welcome Burt today to begin our discussion and an introduction to the legal system here in the United States. Welcome, Burt.
Hey, thanks for having me, Quest.
It's been an interesting year here. We're recording this towards the end of 2022, the end of September, and just talking about the legal system in the United States. Just give me a brief introduction or background on when you began learning about the legal system. What started your journey on your research?
Well, what got me started was a confrontation I had with the Department of Revenue here in Colorado, where they were sending me communications about actually me owing them tax money.
Oh.
And they reference a statute or a code of Colorado for me, saying, well, you owe us this money because of this code. So I researched the code, and the code made reference, because basically what they had done is they filed a return on my behalf. And
interesting.
I'm like, who has the right to file a return on your behalf? I never heard of that. So they sent me a code that justified that. And when I pulled up the code made reference to oil, gas, and petroleum wells. And I was like, well, I don't have any wells of any sort. So I contacted them and I said, where are my wells? Because I'm missing out on some money here.
Right.
And they didn't want to address that issue. So I'm like, okay, since they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? So I went and bought myself the IRS code book and pretty much read it from front to cover, trying to understand what income was. That led me to researching all kinds of other things that had to do with guns, with the medical establishment, vaccines. And then I became very familiar with the U.S. code. And that just pushed me on and on to where it's a never-ending road once you start going down that road, because there's enough material for you to learn to fulfill every day of your life.
Yeah, it sounds like. So the tax code, this is the document that people talk about that's 7 times bigger than the Bible. Is it this thing that you're talking about?
Exactly, the IRS code, Title 26.
Wow.
And what was interesting with that book is that if you try to understand the income tax system, and that's what I was trying to do, you start at one page and you go through hundreds of pages, and then eventually you end up back where you started. And that's what happened to me.
So in computer programming, they would call that a circular loop, right? That would be like the failure in logic, because you get back to that same point every time.
Yeah, and then after going through all that trouble, then I come to find out that the term income is not defined anywhere in the U.S. Code. It has been defined by the Supreme Court, and that's what rules. But government people will not tell you about the meaning of income, because if you did understand the meaning of income, then if you spread it to too many people, then the cat, like they say, would be let out of the bag, right?
Oh, very interesting. The definition of income. Okay. And what year was this?
Oh, God, I think I started this path over 30 years ago.
Wow. I'm going to go ahead and let you lead. What do you think are the most important things for someone brand new to understanding or beginning to research the legal system, law, and taxes? What would be the first principles?
Well, the first principle is to understand the foundation of this country, how it came to be. Most people just have a brief knowledge of the 13 colonies, and there was a revolution, and then here we are in the United States, and the United States is for the right of the individual, and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden they start quoting propaganda. So if someone wants to go down this path, first of all, they have to accept the reality that most of us live in a commercial. We are not taught, we are indoctrinated, and we are fed propaganda. So every government uses propaganda. In the United States, the propaganda is probably the greatest in history. And this is easy to prove. Just simply look at some topic that the government is trying to push down your throat and go through every news channel and every radio station, and they're all saying the same thing. So you know that there's a coordinated effort to control your thoughts. And that's what the United States is all about, controlling your thoughts. So if you begin from the very beginning, how did the colonies came to be, what you're going to realize is that the United States is in fact a corporation. And once you understand that the United States is a corporation, then you need to ask, well, why is our government a corporation? Then you'll begin to understand why it works the way it works. And there's nothing wrong with being ruled by a corporation, but you have to understand your association to that corporation and the limited power of that corporation. It's like, for example, you could have a business and hire a private corporation to handle your security. And that security company will even tell you as the owner, I'm sorry, sir, you cannot enter your business without giving us the password. And you have to give them the password, otherwise you can't get into your own business.
Yeah.
So you have to understand these limits. And that's basically what the United States government is supposed to be. They're sort of like a security company to secure your rights and protect you, the people who make up the country. But that idea has been lost, and now instead of the government being the company that you hired to protect you, now you are the servant of that company. That's how it has been turned around. And of course, they accomplish a lot of these things by trading freedom for benefits. And one of the biggest scams that was perpetrated on the people was the Social Security Act.
Right.
By giving you a few peanuts, they give you this number, and people don't realize what they're giving up with this number. With this number, you're giving up your freedom, because now they can track every step of your life through that number. And we can get into that down the road, how I have two kids that don't have a Social Security number because I wanted to protect them. So if there's any such number, it's considered the number of the beast, right? That's it. And other countries are now adopting that same system because it's wonderful. It allows them to keep track of all their citizens.
All their human resources.
Yeah, all the cattle on their ranch.
Right. Yeah, I remember one of the conversations we had years back. It was something to the effect of it. It's not the founding fathers per se; it's the founding farmers, and we're just all cattle on their farm.
Yeah, and that's why people need to understand, because the 13 colonies were in fact 13 corporations, and they were granted these powers to make colonies/corporations by the king, who himself made himself into a corporation. Because why? Because it's easier to do business as a corporation than under your own name. And once you begin to see that, you're like, oh, okay, well, it makes sense. They had a corporation, and then the corporation was divided into counties. It was divided into whatever subdivisions to allow the people to work within that grid, basically,
right.
A grid that then could be managed. But we cannot forget the fact that corporations are fictions. Corporations are something created out of the mind of men. So it's not real. And if you have a corporation, if you have a thing that's fictional, like if you talk about Mickey Mouse, if Mickey Mouse creates anything, whatever Mickey Mouse creates is fictional, because Mickey Mouse is fictional.
Right.
So anything that belongs to the corporation is fictional. And it only exists under what? Under your willingness to contract with it.
And your acquiescence. Yeah.
Yeah. If you let the corporation do X, Y, Z long enough, then it becomes an idea. Oh, well, it's legal. And, and we mentioned before we began the podcast about Roe versus Wade. So for 50 years, right, people have been acting like that's true, like that was correct. Like this was the law of the land. Well, the Supreme Court just came around and said, no, it's not the law of the land because it's not a matter of federal interest. It's not a constitutionally protected right. That would be up to the states to decide.
Right. And it took them 50 years to figure that out.
Yeah, because it took that long to get all of the radical communists out of the Supreme Court.
And think about slavery. Same thing. They founded the country and slavery was okay. And then at some point down the road, they said, oh, yeah, this is a really bad practice. We're going to stop doing this. We're going to introduce the 14th Amendment, right?
Yeah, which people thought was a great idea. But there's drawbacks to the 14th Amendment. And when I tell people that the 14th Amendment is now irrelevant, and they say, well, why is it irrelevant? It protects you. I said, no, because the 14th Amendment was created to protect who? To protect the slaves. Now that the slaves are all dead, what is the purpose of the 14th Amendment?
That everybody that was born after that are born slaves.
Are born, well, everybody after the emancipation and the Civil War and all that, everybody that was born after that, they're free. They don't need protection from the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment was to grant those people citizenship. Right,
because they were in no man's land, right?
Right, because it gave them federally protected citizenship.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm sure there's a whole discussion in and of itself right there. So.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so first principles, you said understanding the founding of this country, understanding that corporations existed before the country existed, and that's what created. And so my question to you is, was there any time in U.S. history during the founding or around the founding where this Republican form of government was set up and it wasn't just propaganda? There was actually a functioning government where the body politic were created by the people and those such things.
Yeah, pretty much you could say the first 100 years of this country were pretty much true to what the country was supposed to be. But I mean, right up until the turn of the century, the beginning of the 1900s, and pretty much even through World War II, although World War I, World War II, all that stuff was propaganda. We can get into that another time. But at least through the early 1900s, the people, and when we say the people, we're talking about all the citizens who in heart and soul and in practice support the United States, support their country. Okay, so those people were pretty much the same. They pretty much had common genealogy, common roots, which were basically Europe, and it made it easy for the country to be cohesive. Then in the 60s, when they opened up the floodgates to immigration, things have led to where we are today, because you cannot have a nation full of groups of people that have opposing views. That's just common sense. You're not going to have a group of red ants and group them with a bunch of carpenter ants and expect them all to live together and happily ever after. They have different interests.
We had different interests before the founding, though, too.
Well, not really, because before the founding, most of these people came from where? From England.
Mm-hmm.
They were all English. So they all had this common sense of common law and common respect for your countryman. And that was carried over into the creation of the U.S. And, they came here, they conquered, they took over the place, the group of people who, if there's a group of people outside of the English that deserve attention, that deserve whatever protection or assistance from the government, is the natives who were here before then. Outside of the natives, everybody else is a foreigner.
Right. And I'm part of that group. My family has been in the same part of southern Colorado for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's well documented on my end. So I am part of that population that you speak of that was here before the founding of, my family was here before the founding of this country.
Yeah, and then you have a bunch of people in California, Nevada, New Mexico that were living there before those territories were taken by the United States, right?
Yep.
And those people are also those original inhabitants that, in my book, they should have been given some type of a special category. They were all made citizens, but they should have been given some kind of a additional title because they were here already. They had their own lands, they had their own ranches, they had their own everything.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just one of the many. So, but it is what it is. But
Right.
But those people I consider them special citizens.
And there's language to that effect in some of the government documents where they talk about indigenous and those type of things. So there is
Right.
some language to it. But think about it from their perspective. Why would they give some group of people they're conquering some special status and welcome them into some sort of leadership there at the table to say, oh, we recognize your sovereignty, we recognize that you are autonomous and that you don't need our help, you guys are surviving and doing fine just on your own. It doesn't make sense.
Right. So one of the things that I've spoken with other people about is that what these people should have been granted is some type of protection of their lands. That's the only thing that really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happened with most of the natives here in the U.S. is their lands were taken.
Yeah.
And then they were moved into reservations. Some reservations which are basically desert, and that's not right. But anyway, bigger picture. Yeah. So looking at the bigger picture, you have those people, and then you have the people who came here to start a new life, and that's one of the big problems that we're having in the U.S. is that people come here and they don't assimilate. They don't become Americans. And it is easy to see in some of the towns where you have, for example, the people that are trying to pray on the sidewalks, they block the roads and they start bowing toward the east, right?
Right.
So who are these people? These are the people that have a Muslim background. And how can you have a nation, a Christian nation? And that's another point that the propaganda is pushing away. The United States is a Christian nation. Whether you like Christianity or whether you don't like Christianity, it's irrelevant. This country is Christian. And it was founded on Christian foundations because those were the people who founded this country. So to come in here and try to change this country from Christianity to Judea to Islam to whatever means that you're not coming here to enjoy and participate and become what this nation is. You're coming here to conquer.
Right. Yeah.
And why would you open up your floodgates to someone to come here and conquer? So that's what I was getting into, is that now the United States is becoming a group of people that are not working for the same goal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And when you have a government that is trying to satisfy all of these people, what do you end up with? You end up with a government trying to cater to everyone, and the only way government can cater to anyone is by what? By writing checks. And they try to buy out all of these different groups. And they print out billions for you. Okay, and where's that money going to come from? Well, that's okay. The next 100, 200 years, we'll get it paid off. So right now, they're giving away the wealth, the future of your grandkids. Some could say they're giving away the future of your great-grandkids.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way they try to tie the federal budget and the debt on each and every American, I think is ridiculous. But they, through their propaganda machine, like you're saying, they try to imply that, we, the people, all owe this thing that they mismanaged and they're using it for their own interests. But, we're got to be the one to pay the bill. We're the ones that got to, pony up the dough and come up with the money, which is, ridiculous in and of itself.
Yeah. And then, so you were asking about what is the next things that people should know. Well, one thing that people need to realize is anyone pretty much under 35 they've already been very propagandized. And you have to understand that there's a lot that you should have learned in high school and you didn't. So you need to educate yourself. I always say ignorance is a disease that's easily cured by opening a book.
Yeah.
So most of the people here suffer from that disease, and they have the disease on one hand and they have the cure on the other, and they need to exercise it, because most people fall victims when it comes to dealing with the government. They fall victims to who? To the legal profession. And they go searching for attorneys to help them in a situation that most of them can help themselves if they just open up their eyes and open up a book.
Yeah. And, running to an attorney is exactly what they want, because they've created this system of dependency, and they don't want people to be self-sufficient. They want them to be dependent. And so they want people to be dependent on a government for handouts, for food, for whatever. And they want people to be dependent on lawyers for the advice, the decision-making, how to proceed in certain events and things when it comes to government, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to law. And it's the same system. It's just a system perpetuating itself, that you want it to be dependent. Well, every person that's hearing my voice should be recognizing that the only way that we're going to get out of a system like this is to be independent, everyone has to be their own researcher. Everyone has to take the initiative of the things that are challenging them in their own lives. And like you said, go do the research and, remove your ignorance.
Yes. And if you don't do the research, you become a victim at every level. And I'm going to give an example. All cities, towns, or whatever, they have some type of a group of people, that commissioners or whatever, that rule over them. Well, who makes up the local government? Well, when you go to the mall and you look left and right, front and behind you, it's those people around you. They're the ones who make up the local government. So if they are anything like you, then you need to ask yourself, well, how much do they know about the history? How much do they know about the law? How much do they know about researching? And all of those commissioners or whatever small group of government, a mayor, city, whatever, who generally speaks on their behalf? It's an attorney. They rely on an attorney to help them understand the so-called law. And most of those people, they don't even look at the code where the law was written. So when they come after you saying that you violated XYZ, your first step is to look at the XYZ that they say that you violated and research that XYZ and understand the terms that they're making reference to, and understand whatever it is that how you fit into the thing that they're saying that you violated. And then if you end up hiring an attorney, the main purpose of the attorney is not to tell you what the law means. You should be able to figure that out on your own. The main purpose of an attorney is to help you with procedures, to help you with moving your case through the court system. Leaving the whole battle or making your attorney the general of your case is fatal, because the attorney doesn't really care about your case. You're just one of many.
Right.
And like this one guy says, no one will ever know your case better than you. So you will know your case better than anybody, including the attorney that you hired. The attorney that you hired is just going to give you 5-10 minutes to review your case, often the day or the morning before the hearing. That's the first time that your attorney is looking at your case.
Right.
Is that how you want to go to war? Yeah, General, we're ready to go to war. Okay, give me the plans. I haven't looked at the plans. You want the general to look at the war plans 5 minutes before firing the first shot?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people are facing in the legal system, because it's a money-making machine for the attorneys.
Definitely. The judges are in on it. And the whole thing about what I've learned over the years about the QSIP number and the SESTA QV trust and all of that stuff. And like you said, it's just a big money-making opportunity. But, you hire an attorney, automatically your status gets lowered, right? In the eyes of everyone. First of all, you can't be competent on your own. You need help, right? Your attorney is your hired help to kind of help you do whatever in the legal system. But just making that move automatically puts you in a position where you lose a lot of your abilities, right? You lose a lot of the strength and the power that you could bring as an individual into a courtroom.
Well, and that's the thing, is that when you give all your powers to the attorney to represent you, which means to stand in court as you give up the most important power, which is the power to say no.
Mm-hmm.
When the attorney begins to do something that you don't agree with, you have to be able to tell the attorney, no, you're not going to do that. But most attorneys will not take no for an answer, or will not take no for a command.
Yeah,
They're just going to do whatever they want.
They're acting independently. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the first rules that you need to practice when you hire an attorney is tell the attorney, you file no papers without my consent. I must read everything before you file it. And what attorneys often do is they wait 5 minutes before the deadline to file their papers, and they say, well, I ran out of time. I didn't have time to send you the papers to review.
Mm-hmm. And consent is such an important thing in our culture today. We seeing what happened with the Me Too movement and people coming out saying, hey, this person abused me, this person violated me, this person did something to me without my consent. You have the same situations when it comes to attorneys where you need to set those boundaries and say, hey, I required to be able to review all these documents, and I need to have my consent on anything that we submit to the court.
Yeah, so another good thing for people to become aware of is when you see a big trend, like, for example, what happened these last 2 years with all of this COVID nonsense. When you see something like that happening, you need to ask, okay, who's benefiting from this? There's always someone benefiting from some kind of massive movement, especially if it's supported by the media. Who's benefiting from that? And then pause, always pause. Don't go with the flow of the herd just because they're going in that direction. Step to the side, understand why they're doing it, what's the benefit to you personally, and what's the potential harm. I mean, all of these people jumped on the bandwagon of this COVID nonsense, and all of these COVID vaccines, and all of this COVID 6 feet apart and COVID wearing masks. All BS. There's no science in any of that stuff.
Right.
And when all that stuff started, the first question I asked was, okay, where is the verifiable evidence? Where's the verifiable experiment that any of this stuff is real? Because if it's based on science, well, what's science? Science is all about experiments.
Right.
So if someone starts talking to you about science, oh, well, this is backed by science. Oh, wonderful. Let me see the verifiable experiments. And you can ask the CDC, you can ask your local or state Department of Health for the verifiable experiments, and they're going to send you on a wild goose chase, which is what my Department of Health did. And basically they said, go ask the CDC. So I did. I asked the CDC, and the CDC provided nothing. No verifiable experiments on COVID vaccine or any vaccine for that matter, which is another subject that we can get into, because one of my goals in life was actually to become a biochemist. So I understand some about vaccines and disease and viruses. And everything has to be reproducible through some type of experiment. If there's no experiment to make reference to, then that means that you are in the experiment.
Yeah, you are the experiment. Wow.
And that's what all these vaccine programs are. They're nothing but a giant experiment. So are they experimenting for disease, or are they experimenting for something else? And the something else is what you need to try to understand, because this is poison. And now that they're talking about RNA being introduced into your system, people don't even know what any of that means. Yeah. What's the potential harm of that down the road?
I've always stated that I'm in the control group for the vaccine, so I have to remain here
neutral
because of science.
Yeah, you have to be the one that didn't get injected, so that they can have something to compare it to.
Yeah, I'm just taking one for the team here. I want to survive, but I got to be here just to make sure that all of our studies and our data is accurate.
Yeah, if I end up getting sick, well, now you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so much. And it's when I hear nurses, doctors, and all those people pushing any of these agendas, and I go and start asking, like I've even asked vets. I mean, even vets. So, okay, name me one experiment that any of these vaccines. Oh, I'm not going to do the research for you. Go do it yourself. Well, come on. When you went to school, I'm sure you know the rabies vaccine has been around forever. I'm sure there's some kind of experiment that was conducted on rabies to justify the production of the rabies vaccine.
Right.
Oh, I'm not going to do your research. Go do that yourself. That's basically the answer that I get.
Yeah. Very interesting. And like you said earlier, what reinforces this? The propaganda, right? Just browbeating people over the head, every single platform, every single social media, censoring anything that is a dissenting view, right? You can't let people debate these things. Shut them up. Get rid of them,
Right,
right?
right. And now what it's becoming so bad that people get upset if you ask the question.
Right. Yeah.
And
They're offended by that for even
yeah,
asking a question.
yeah. And one thing that I tell my kids about education is I ask them, I mean, of course, they have the answer memorized by now, but at the beginning, I would ask, okay, what's the most important thing about learning? And everybody needs to understand this. What is the most important thing about learning? The most important thing about learning is doubting all the information that's presented to you. That's the most important thing. You must doubt it, you must verify it, and if you accept the verification of that information, then you can accept it as truth. But never ever accept information at face value, because then you're being propagandized or indoctrinated.
Right. And this is what Jan Irvin had taught, so long ago. And what he opened my eyes to was this concept of the trivia method, which was a systematic method of determining fact from fiction. Just like you're saying, whatever information that's presented to you, you need a method to be able to determine, okay, is this true or not? Is this fact or fiction? Am I being propagandized? Am I being lied to? Or is there truth to this? It can only be one or the other.
Yeah, and there's certain facts that you may never be able to prove. Let's say you didn't know anything about how the planets move and all that kind of stuff. So the sun comes up from the east, and it's been coming up from the east since you can remember, and since everybody in your family can remember. But can you prove that it's going to come up the next day? Can you really prove? Can you really come up with an experiment that it's going to come up the next day? Well, maybe not, but that's a fact. The next day, it's going to come up from the same side.
Right.
So some facts you can accept because they're repeatable on their own. You may not understand why it's happening, but you can predict that it's going to happen. And we have to be able to differentiate the comprehension of a fact and the application of a fact. And these are the things that are getting lost in school. Even people that go to, for example, medical school, they don't teach them a lot of this kind of stuff. They say, well, here's a drug that gets rid of this problem. Okay, well, how does the drug work? Why do we need the drug? Why can't this other system be put in place? And then when you begin to understand that the medical industry only makes money if you have a problem that they can fix.
Yeah.
If they cannot fix it, it's not worth messing with.
Mm-hmm.
So cancer, colds, whatever disease you want to talk about, if they cannot make money on it, they're not going to mess with it. So the cold, the flu, without the vaccine for it, how can they make money on it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that's what we have to always think about. And the same thing when government wants to give you a benefit or government wants to tax you. Like, for example, I researched into the gas tax and all of these taxes associated with driving, right? With getting in your vehicle, moving down the road. You have registration tax. You have the license plate tax. You have the driver's license tax. Because all of these fees are taxes. Do not kid yourself into thinking that a fee is not a tax. Every time the government gets a cent from you, it's a tax.
Yeah.
What they call it is irrelevant.
Right.
So when you research, you can do this research wherever you live. When you research the amount of money that is collected because you need to go from point A to point B, is astounding the amount of money that they make. I mean, almost the road should be paved like in gold. And yet, in most places where you live, there's potholes here. There's the roads are in disrepair. So why are they in disrepair? Where is all of this money going to? And when you look into it, you realize that they're taking the money for the road, and then they're putting that money into other funds that can be borrowed against.
Right.
So they borrow against that money, or they borrow that money, and they use it for things like compensation, like raises, like vacations, new buildings.
Yeah, city managers are getting paid $800,000 a year in some of these cities. It's ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, they take all of this tax money for the benefit of the worker, of the government worker, the government employee, not your benefit.
Right. Not the person using the road and using,
Yeah. So when you start looking at all of these realities, then you start saying, okay, this is way out of control. And then, once you start understanding all of those things, then you start realizing that, like when they say, well, we need to tax corporations because they're making too much money. Again, if you look at the reality of how that really works, you have to ask the question, do corporations pay taxes? And the obvious answer is no. Why would a corporation pay a tax? If a corporation is making a loaf of bread for 50 cents and the government puts a tax on them that costs them 5 cents, what do you think the price of a loaf of bread is going to be?
55 cents.
That's right. You're going to pay the tax, not the corporation. So corporations do not pay taxes. So a corporate tax is an indirect tax on you.
Yeah, and why does the government not get this yet? I mean, maybe corporations are the ones that influence the government to make these decisions. So corporations have the price of their bread go up.
Well, it's a hand in hand. And then, if you look at, that's why the United States is supposed to be a republic. It's not a democracy. That's the other thing that people need to understand. A democracy is two wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner.
Right.
So it's a republic. And a republic means that you vote in representatives to go to an assembly and vote for your interests.
Right.
That's why you voted them in. That's how a republic is supposed to work. And for example, the U.S. president was never supposed to be elected, and technically it's still not elected directly by the people.
Right.
It was never supposed to be elected by the people because it's too easy to get the people to vote for a tyrant or a doofus like we have now in Biden, just on promises.
Yeah.
Because people like to hear baby talk.
Yeah.
And if you're getting convinced by baby talk, then maybe you need to grow up.
Yeah.
Because the government loves to treat you like a baby, give you pacifiers. And that's what I've learned, is that you need to stay away from government benefits, because every government benefit carries a string and a big stick at the other end of it.
Exactly. And, those of you that are out there that are too young, that don't understand this, that haven't gone through some of these things, just a matter of time, right? It will appear at some point in your life where you're like, wow, why were hundreds and hundreds of dollars taken out of my paycheck? Wow, why do I have to pay 60 cents in addition to every gallon of gas that I buy? Then you see these statistics and what people have to pay every year for taxes. Because of the pandemic, we'll use their excuse and their logic. Because of the pandemic, this unprecedented time, we're going to have to forego paying any and all taxes until the pandemic is over. So sorry, government, but we can't afford to pay all your taxes because, the pandemic.
Yeah. And what's going on right now, I mean, who knows where this is going to end, but anyone who goes to the grocery store, anyone who pays attention to their their bills that they have to pay, they can see that everything is going up dramatically, and it's
Right.
going up a lot faster than your wages.
Absolutely.
So then the question is, who is benefiting from all of this? And that's another matter to get into. But, when money is handed down by the government, who benefits first is those entities who get the money first.
Yep.
And who are the ones that get the money first usually? It's the banks.
The member banks of the Federal Reserve. Yep.
Yeah, so they get the money, they get to buy everything at price X, and then they get to sell it back at 2, 3, 4X down the road.
Yeah, it's nearly impossible for banks to not make money. They get lended money at nearly zero interest rates from the Federal Reserve, and then they lend it to me and you and other people through mortgages and loans and credit cards at 5, 10, 20, 30%. An idiot can make money in a system like that.
Yeah, so that's another matter to get into. But if a nation is going to grow, which every nation needs to grow, if a nation is going to build its infrastructure, if a nation is going to compete in the world with whatever, producing steel, producing wood, producing whatever, you need to allow the population to assist in that process. How does the population get involved in industry? By it being profitable, by it having as little risk as possible. So it is in the government's interest, because the government's interest is the people's interest. So it's in the people's interest to make it easier for business people to get into business. And by making it difficult at the very beginning with these high interest rates, you're setting up the people to fail before they even started.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. They create so many barriers for entry when it comes to creating a business and starting a business, especially in many of the larger states.
Yeah, so government was supposed to help business, was supposed to help the consumer. How is government helping the consumer? By making it more and more difficult for new entities, for new people to enter that particular service through endless regulations. They're not. They're making it, they're reducing the number of vendors that are available to you. And think about one area of vendors, the automobile industry.
Mm-hmm.
How easy is it for a new entity to begin making a new car in the United States? It's almost impossible.
Yeah. Elon Musk learned a lot of those lessons.
Yeah, and if you look across the whole business world, you will see that more and more areas of industry are pretty much closed to the average American. You just can't get into it. And then people that even go through college for 8 years, 10 years to become like a medical doctor or whatever, they come out and all of a sudden they find out that they're a slave to the medical industry, and that it's very easy for you to be blackballed and then never be able to practice, because if they want to ruin your reputation, they'll ruin you.
Right. And just like you were saying about the auto industry, what do you call an industry that is, makes it so prohibitive to join and participate? It's a cartel, right? There's so many cartels, a financial cartel, the Federal Reserve System, the automobile cartel, the way they have the set up the dealerships and that whole system. These are all just criminal cartels.
Right. And right now they've been basically trying to destroy, well, they've been trying to destroy for years, since the 1960s, right? The arms industry.
Mm-hmm.
Through endless regulations and criminal regulations. They pass laws that are against the Constitution, against the original contract with the security company.
Yeah.
If you look at the Constitution as the original contract with the security company, then you understand that the security company cannot do anything without being in line with the original contract. So the Constitution is just a contract.
Yeah.
Don't think of it about anything else. It's a contract that says you can do this and you cannot do that. This is what you can do. That's it. But the security company has given itself huge amplitude to do whatever it wants to do, always in the interest of the people that, well, we're doing it to protect you. And remember, the perfect way for you to be protected is inside 4 walls, called a jail.
Right. Yeah.
So right now, most Americans are partially in jail because they're making your home now, wherever you live, a jail. And then that's another thing that we can get into the fact that nobody owns a home in the United States.
Right. Land trusts, and the people talked about allodial title back in the day when I was, I was a younger person learning about and all of those things. It's a huge topic to discuss.
Yeah. So as long as you're paying property taxes on your home, it's not your home. It belongs to the government. You're renting it. But to try to convince people that, hey, that is the most holy of holiest things that you will invest in your life is your home. So why not vote to eliminate those taxes and make it perpetual? Oh, yeah, but then how are we going to pay for school? And how are we going to pay for roads? How are we going to pay for water? And see, then they start talking about all the benefits that they're going to lose. So they'd rather give up their freedom for security of benefits.
Right.
And that's how most people think. And that mentality has to be gotten rid of. There's nothing more powerful than a community that's united. They're unstoppable.
Absolutely.
But they break you apart by getting group A to accept benefit A, getting the other group to accept benefit B, and so on. And all of a sudden, everybody's fighting against each other because they all want or hope to get different benefits. And who's sitting in the back? The government agents say, okay, now we got them all divided. Now let's conquer them.
Yep.
It's sad.
These are systems that are not new. These methods of control, the way that people are propagandized, this is not a new, novel thing. The new technology is making it easier for them to peer more and more and deeper into people's lives. But these systems of control are not new at all.
Right. So anyway, so moving down the path of what should people be concentrating on, they need to concentrate on understanding how their government works. And you really should start from the bottom up, learning how your local government works, who governs, who makes the decisions, who controls the tax money. And then you move from your city or town to the county, and then from the county to the state, and then from the state to the federal government. And when you move to the federal government, what's funny is that as you move up to the federal government, in reality, things become more simple because the federal government is just the Constitution. The Constitution is a simple, straightforward document.
Yeah.
But at the local level in your state, there's a lot more documents. Of course, every state also has a constitution, which a lot of people don't know.
Right.
So
Yeah.
every state has its own constitution, and all the regulations, all the laws stem from that contract. So when we begin to understand how the government works, then we're able to know what questions to ask. The answer is not what's important. What's important is the question.
Right. Asking the appropriate question.
Yeah, and that's why when I have people approach me about the vaccines and all kind of nonsense, I don't oppose it. I say, oh, great, I'm willing to take the vaccine. First of all, I want to see the verifiable evidence, and then I want to see who's going to be responsible should I have a negative side effect.
Absolutely. When you talk about these city governments, there's something called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report.
Yeah.
Very few people know about. How many of you have ever heard about the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report? What is it? What is it about? I mean, that's a whole topic in and of itself.
Yeah, so it's all about the money. Everything's about the money. And when you look at how, especially, it's easier to see in a local government because you might know the companies that are involved, or it's easier for you to actually drive and see what's going on. So when you're looking at local government, see who are the big corporations that are involved in the local projects, either road building, government construction, building construction, building schools, building anything that has to do with the government. Find out who are the big companies involved, the Department of Health, or who are the companies, who are the people that are providing vaccines, that are making donations to the Department of Health or anything along those lines. And then look at the budget and see where the money's going. You'll be able to see that there's a correlation.
Right. And as we wrap up here in the last couple of minutes, my vision is that I want to create the world that I want my children to live in, and it doesn't exist yet. So I have to build it. You and I have to build it. We have to build this world that we want to live in. It doesn't exist, but people have to step up and not talk about things, but actually do the things in order for this to happen, for it to come to fruition. What are the things that I know? I know that this financial system is coming to an end. I know that this debt is unsustainable for this government and just about every Western government country in the world. If you have that understanding that the wheels are going to fall apart here soon, we got to figure out what are we going to do? How do we triage this, right? So the accident is going to happen. We see the train down the tracks. We know that we can't stop it. But how do we triage it? How do we stop the bleeding first, right? Put a tourniquet on, but then also figure out solutions on how we can do business with one another, because we know we're going to need to do that for, our livelihood, for our food, those type of things. How do we move forward in this new way of living after all of these systems are going to fail? It's inevitable.
Yeah. So one of the things that everybody needs to start thinking about and prevent the propaganda from swaying your position is never vote for taxes. You need to vote to eliminate taxes. If you have a parasite that's stuck to your arm, stuck to your back, stuck to your leg, what's the best way to get rid of it is to stop feeding it, to starve it, and then it will just die on its own. Government is a needed parasite. We have to have some sort of government. But the governments now have become humongous. They say that the percentage of the population now working for the government, that means local and federal, is over 10%. Over 10% of the population works for the government. That's insane.
That is insane.
That's a huge burden on the people who are working, the 90% that are working.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you can take 10% of everything you make. And where is it going? It's going to pay for government retirement, for government vacation, for government races, for government all this and government all that. Nice buildings, air conditioned, government vehicles.
You could work for any city in America for the fire department for 20 years and get a pension and retire.
Yeah, so we really need to rethink all of these things at the local level. And you begin by cutting off the bloodline to these government systems, because it's not even people, it's a system. The people have become secondary now, and what's primary now is the system. People uphold a system. And the only system that should be upheld is the system of a republic where the people rule, not ruled. And the people rule not as a mob, like has happened with all this BLM and all this kind of stuff. No, it's ruled by the people through their representatives.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point for us to summarize and to wrap up. So, Burt, thank you again for your time. I look forward to future conversations that we can have together, and have a good rest of your day. Any parting thoughts?
Stay free, and keep your powder dry.
Absolutely. All right, we'll wrap it with that. Thank you, Burt.
All right, take care.